were there as well, would you wanna announce, well, from both sides, like if you were on the Zed Run team and being a player, I mean it's kind of a two-folded question, but like would you announce every change if you were an engineer there? And being a player of the game, do you want to see them announce every change?
So the one problem with announcing every change is that you already have people thinking like, oh man, what did they do to my horse? They killed my baby. So it's going to make that worse. But at the same time, if the goal, or if they're already saying it's provably fair, how is it fair to change how racing works without telling people? If you could publicly prove and verify each race, you would see already that you would be able to know that those changes had been made. So it seems like a thing that has to be there for the system to be provably fair, as they kind of still say it is. But I if I'm there, I'm announcing like, hey, we made some tweaks. And I think the way to do it that minimizes people kind of getting into tinfoil hat mode is to use the concept of seasons, where it's like, hey, we're not changing anything for 3 months. At the 3 month mark, we kind of take into account how everything is working, like the kind of profitability range of all these horses, and make small tweaks, so that like, okay, like, yeah, that last season was dominated by a very specific type of horse. We're going to kind of take another look and see if we can't spread the wealth a little bit, right? Like I know people worry about it being too fair, where every horse, like with the rake, like just loses a little bit of money, and nobody's kind of like cleaning it up. There is a lot of that's kind of where the skill comes into play, um, in breeding or in assessing or in joining races. But the horses shouldn't all be the same. So I think that also gets into another thing, which is breeding should. I think they're going to make it more complicated. I hope they do. So there's less of a random component to it, because once that's there, I think the kind of skill increases as well, or the potential for skill to matter more.
Yeah, I really like what you said with seasons because yeah, we'll know within this time frame we're not going to have any major changes within this time frame. So if I have a good horse, I can run him for say these 3 months. At the end of the season,
Yeah,
he might get nerfed a little bit or something, but I know for this time
yeah,
being I have a killing. And if you don't have a good horse in that time, you just be like, "Hey, come back next season and it
right.
might be a little bit better," right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that solves some of their problems. I don't know if it creates new ones, but I that's kind of like my pie in the sky. Like it would solve the kind of people worrying like every week, like, oh, what did they change? People DM me all the time, like I was at 20% win rate and now I'm like 5%, and I'm like, that's kind of how variance works. Like Zed is like poker in some ways. You can have a bad run. And they're like, but I haven't had a win in like 30 races. And I'm like, that's kind of nothing though. Like, uh, like you will have bad runs like that. And then sometimes in very few instances, I can look back and be like, oh, like, no, you're in a different environment because it seems like they made that change distance preference. So, on like before and after August 23rd, you can make an argument for like, okay, yeah, that's a real change. But a lot of the other ones are like, yeah, no, the competitive landscape is much different.